Next, an utterly cynical and heartbreaking scam that we've featured on the programme many times in the past. It involves vast amounts of money and leaves people seriously out of pocket. So why is it still able to happen? Well, that's exactly the question that one of our viewers asked. So we felt we really had to try and find out. These meadows might look like any other field in the English countryside. But there was a time when this land came with the promise of huge financial returns for canny punters looking to steal a march on the property developers. Retired cruise ship manager Peter Pratt from Ripon in North Yorkshire was one investor sucked in by what seemed a perfect opportunity.
I was at sea for just over 42 years. I was a hotel general manager on cruise ships. Certainly it was quite a responsible job because it's a bit like running a small town.
Before he stopped work in October 2010, Peter wanted to make sure that he had arrangements in place to truly make the most of his retirement. So he was open to ideas on how to best invest his life savings.
I started feeling a bit panicky, I suppose, in that I was suddenly going to go from a pretty reasonable salary to a pension, but I did wonder how I was going to keep up my standard of living.
He had savings, but was concerned that they weren't growing.
Although I had money in ISAs and shares and bonds, they really weren't doing anything.
Peter's interest was pricked when he received a cold call from a company called Plot UK Limited, offering him an opportunity to invest in land in Bedfordshire or Northamptonshire.
Plot UK were offering to sell me plots of land, which at the time didn't have planning permission, but these plots of land were going to be bought by a large property developer, and they sent me their glossy brochure and it all looked above board. As I'd invested in land before, I felt relatively comfortable with it.
The Plot UK representative told Peter that the land he was interested in buying was earmarked to be turned into a housing development. This, he was told, meant that if he moved quickly, he could eventually sell on the land for around 3 times what he'd pay for it now.
My initial reaction to the offer was one of excitement, really. I suppose particularly because the government were making such a noise about the fact that they were below their target. Everything seemed to fit in.
Convinced by the slick sales patter, Peter decided to go full steam ahead, paying £10,000 for his high-value land. But not long after, a Plot UK broker who handled his purchase, a Mr. Harry Nelson, began to pressurise Peter into buying further plots.
Harry Nelson was calling me 3 to 4 times a week, building up a position of trust.
He told Peter that the property developer would want to buy out the larger investors first.
So therefore, the more money I put in, the quicker I would be able to sell my plots to the developer, and I would be able to realise my investment.
Persuaded that the way to realise his promised returns was to keep investing, Peter's payments to the company kept going up and up.
But gradually the amounts requested increased. Soon I was sending in 40,000 and then 50,000, and towards the end I was putting in 100,000 at a time.
Peter bought a total of 28 plots, costing him over £500,000. But despite being told that he'd done everything he needed to do in order to turn his investment into gold, paying such an eye-watering amount was making him decidedly uncomfortable.
Towards the end, I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable regarding the amount of money that I had put in. I was beginning to have suspicions. However, I think I was probably in denial that I could be so stupidly had, if you like.
His anxiety started to grow when Harry Nelson stopped answering his phone. Just 4 weeks after Peter had made his last investment, Mr. Nelson was nowhere to be found. And the next that Peter heard about the company was when a letter arrived in the post from the Financial Services Authority, now known as the Financial Conduct Authority. In short, this told Peter that the land he'd purchased was in fact worthless and that he'd fallen victim to an elaborate land banking scam.
I felt sick, numb, almost suicidal really, as I realised what I'd done to not only myself but my family. I couldn't believe that I'd been a victim of such fraud. It's obviously left us in a very difficult financial position and also a position of trust between my wife and myself. So things will never ever really be the same.
Peter and his family had lost over £500,000. Most of all, it's unlikely that they'll ever see any of his money again. The company, Plot UK Limited, were not registered with the FCA, meaning that there is no way that Peter can apply for compensation.
I think the basic problem I had was greed. Harry Nelson obviously had done his homework and I was definitely greedy. It sounded too good an opportunity to miss.
Harry Nelson had clearly not just targeted Peter. There were over 100 investors. And this large-scale scam was brought to court by the FCA in January of 2015. The fraudsters were convicted in what is now a landmark case, where it was established that they'd scammed investors out of a total of £4.3 million. And Harry Nelson, whose real name it turned out was Aaron Patru, was jailed for 5 years for his part. Along with 7 of his colleagues, the fraudsters were jailed for a total of 26 years.
Obviously, the sentences, as far as I'm concerned, don't really match the enormity, certainly, of what they've done to me.
The FCA, for their part, hope that this prosecution will act as a warning to others. Cases of so-called land banking fraud are attractive to scammers who are eager to take advantage of people's desire to make a quick buck in the property market.
We estimate that land banking schemes have cost UK investors over 200 million. On the face of it, the FCA doesn't regulate land. What we do regulate, however, is collective investment schemes. Collective investment schemes means that your money is pooled with the money of other investors. So using that legislation, we were able to identify this as a scam and get those criminal convictions that we needed.
Despite the high-profile convictions of the Plot UK scam, it doesn't seem to have put off other criminals. Peter believes that he has been targeted again by a company offering to take his worthless plots of land off his hands, in return, of course, for a fee.
They're offering approximately 50% of what I paid for them. However, the way their scam works is that they wish you to pay about £5,000 up front for their administrative costs. And if you ever paid that, that's the last you'd hear of it.
Of course, Peter reported this company to the FCA, and they have advice on what to do if you are targeted in the same way that he was.
People will make huge promises of fantastic guaranteed returns. That's often one of the ways to spot a scam. Put the phone down on any cold call making promises that seem too good to be true. If you're still tempted, I would advise you to do your homework. So check our FCA website, check our register. If it's a land banking scheme, check your local council, look at the small print. You can't be too cautious.
Peter still can't quite believe that he was taken in by such a scam. And now, with no money left to pay off his mortgage, he's facing a very different retirement to the one that he'd planned.
If I could turn the clock back, which obviously I can't, I would have left my investments as they were, boring and rather unproductive, but at least the money was there. I shouldn't have been so greedy, and I very much regret what has happened.